Very interesting subject, Bob, and I guess, well, maybe I should just mention that actually about a year ago, I happened to have someone tell me about a book called Lifespan
Mm-hmm.
by David Sinclair, and I read it. It was very interesting, very much in line with what the links, well, some of the links pointed to the interest in cells as opposed to chasing AI. Anyway, I'll leave it there for the moment.
Yes, I'm just waiting for James to tag in.
Yeah. Health span is what we want as a goal, not just lifespan. We don't want to be just alive. We want to have good health throughout.
And David Sinclair makes that point.
I read his book.
Good.
I also read a book, The Body Keeps the Score, which talks about, things that you do that harm your health over time.
Well, when I actually, for the very first time, went through every single one of Bob's links.
Bravo.
I haven't done that in the past. I've tended to sort of high spot and look at videos and move on. And actually, my conclusion was when I looked at the links, they sort of divided into two categories. One was AI chasing what I would call repetitive coincidences to somehow zero in on things that affected longevity. The other lot were more into living sensibly, looking after your cells.
Okay, now we have a quorum. Hi, James.
Greetings.
Ah.
We're not out of the woods though.
Which woods are we in?
So this month's topic was a little interesting in that it affects all of us. I think we're of an age. And the other thing that I notice is that we're at an age where probably a lot of this stuff is not going to be necessarily for us. It may be for the next generation.
Yes.
Well, I mean, going back to David Sinclair's book, I mean, one of the things I remember reading in there was that metformin, which was a naturally occurring substance which was used in the early days to do with diabetes and so on. And it seems as though by sheer coincidence, looking statistically at the lifespan of diabetics that took metformin and those who didn't, that it became significant that an extension of life was available for those who took metformin regularly.
Norman and I both take metformin daily.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very cheap here. It's true, and there is a temptation there. But I found myself thinking, well, I don't know really whether it will extend my life or not. How will I know until I die?
Well, sometimes you go with, if it doesn't cause any harm, might as well take it.
Well, I agree with that.
So just go ahead and take it.
Are there any other metformin takers on the screen?
I used to take it and then my doctor took me off it. I'm not sure why. But I'm wondering, Keaton and Norman, if maybe that's the reason you haven't gotten your gray hair yet. I mean, Norman, I don't know how you do that. My father-in-law had hair just about your color, Norman, until really almost when he died, which was almost 90. And he was a big worrier. And he'd always used to say, I'm living proof that worrying does not cause gray hair.
Well, the truth is that my wife colors my hair. So there you have it. Now, my wife, who is younger than I am by quite a bit, she does keep me young. That is true. Young in appearance, but young at heart as well.
You know, that's almost as big an admission as admitting that you can't drive a stick shift. So that's really good to keep me.
I can. I learned to
I know,
drive.
I'm sure my son can't drive a stick shift, but he's very ashamed of it.
Should be.
So we are on the revolution of many things happening. A lot of it with AI generation, generative processes. A lot of it with RNA, a lot of it with CRISPR. And it's just amazing where we are going to be going in the next few years with this. Does anybody have any comments about that? On how science has changed?
I'm not so sure that any of the science that is either ready for launch or in the works is going to really statistically and significantly alter what we've already got. Nobody's talking about eternal life. Nobody's talking about extending the lifespan to 200 years. So the issue to me is, what are we gaining from all this? If all we're doing is gaining years, that's not a big deal. If we're gaining better health until we croak, that would be wonderful. So I hope that's where the emphasis goes in all of this research is improving how healthy we are until we croak.
And also it brings up the question of, well, I mean, is it possible that, with the right science, that actually one could just go on living and living and living, and the cells would keep reproducing themselves to keep you young, and you go on forever? I mean, is that a reasonable proposition, or is it more likely that the human body actually has a finite lifespan? It eventually can't defeat the breakdown of cells indefinitely.
Well, I don't think we're limited by whether our cells are immortal or not. We'll be eventually have digital memory sufficiently sophisticated and secure that we can go on. Our consciousness can probably go on forever until the planet blows up or whatever.
But
So
are we still breathing?
no, we won't be breathing. Hopefully not breathing. Oxygen would not do well in that kind of an environment.
So in essence, you become a digital spirit.
Whatever it is, it's shifting one sort of biochemical electrical set of units for one that's a little more efficient, one that doesn't require a nice zero beer to make it run better.
So should I be happy with my digital brain and not worry about my body?
There you go.
Well,
See, that takes us to the old mind-body distinction. Right now, there isn't any, but once we go digital, then the body becomes irrelevant and the mind becomes everything.
well, except I live in my body at
Well,
the
you do
moment.
now, but that's just out of habit and lack of technology.
Yeah, I imagine they could, they have these things now, what do you put them on your, and they can simulate, whatever. So maybe they can implant in your digital brain all these, like maybe I can be, play Major League Baseball and hit home runs or something like that, or invent something cool. Maybe that'll be the fantasy in the digital brain.
Right. Reality will become, the distinction between reality and fantasy will become zero. And we're getting that way pretty much anyway in the news, so what the hell?
So I have a little spin on this that I just thought maybe I'd throw into the mix. My dad was very he looked very young for his age. When he was probably 45, if you saw a picture of my dad at 45, you would think he was 25. And my mom actually was 22 years younger than my dad. So I was actually 46 when my dad was 46 when I was born, and my mom was, I think, 23. But I think because he did have this very youthful appearance, he was always very concerned about his youth. And, you know, he liked to, I don't know what the right word is, but he was very happy that people would mistake him for being so much younger than he was. And the bad part of that was when he did finally, you know, when it came to where that just broke down, he was shattered. You know, so the whole notion of longevity and living long and looking good and all of that was so important to him that when the inevitable finally came, and he said to me, the last time I saw him, which I actually unfortunately lived in Pennsylvania at the time, and he lived in California. When I came to see him, and you know, I didn't have much time to see him, he said, "Michael, you've come to see me in my misery." And that just, that really, I mean, it was just, but, you know, so I have this view that is almost, I don't want to experience that same thing and don't want to be pursuing the fountain of youth. And yet if somebody gave me a pill today that said, well, you can live healthily for another 20 years, I'd certainly take it. But I have some ambivalence over the topic. That's, I guess, what I, you know, wanted to share by that.
Joyce, can you add some sanity to this line of discussion, please?
Well, no, what you made me think of, Mike, is I worked with a woman years ago. She was younger than I was, and she was in her 20s. She was fairly good looking, and she told me that when she felt she was losing her looks, she would kill herself because she felt that her looks were the most important thing about her. And I thought she was absolutely out of her mind, and I still do. But I do think that there is a part of the culture that values youth and looks so much that if we lived a long time and we lived a long time looking, you know, like we do now, as opposed to looking like we did in our 20s, I think that might be hard for people. Either that or it might create a huge cultural change if you have a large segment of the population, you know, who looks elderly for decades but remains in good health. But I do think I wouldn't want long life without health. I've seen people who've lived far past the time when their bodies were able to, and it's a misery. So we want long health, not long life, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the real issue on this is not how long you live, but what's your quality of life while you live.
Right.
Health span.
Health span, exactly.
And I think a big part of that quality of life is attitude, in the sense that, well, about 3 years ago, I guess it was 4 years, 4 years ago, I jerked up my back doing something that, you know, I was way over my head for my age, and it's probably going to be there the rest of my life. And I'm really pissed off about it because there are things that I can't do now that I used to could do no problem. But I guess, you know, what I've tried to do in the meantime is I've tried to say, okay, what can you do attitudinally? You know, how can you incorporate this into your life and not be so pissed off about the fact that you can't do stuff that you used to could do anymore? And I do think there's a certain maturity. One thing for sure, don't pick that up anymore. You know, don't try to move heavy stuff anymore. But I do think there's a certain attitude that has been beneficial in that I've had to face my own limitations and still try to have a meaningful life, even though I can't do some of the stuff I used to do.
But that's adapting to changes in your life, which you have to do if you want to carry on living. I mean, that's where you have to show a measure of maturity.
Right.
I would just like to go back on the metformin thing, because 3 people have been joined us: a black cat, a lady, Joyce, and Brad. Earlier on, we just had a short conversation about metformin. and I wondered whether any of you are taking it. You newcomers.
I'm not a newcomer, but I didn't answer before. I'm not taking it. I have heard Keaton and Norman talking about it before, but I haven't.
How about you, Brad?
I've heard that name, and that's all I know about it.
Well, and there's Catherine there too. Do you take metformin, Catherine?
No.
Well, the only relevance of metformin to this discussion is that in a book called Lifespan, there was a section in there which mentioned that the naturally occurring substance metformin, which has been used by diabetics for years, it was found statistically quite a long time later that actually the people that took metformin had their life extended, and of course they had diabetes, their life was extended something like 4 or 5 years over those who did not. And that's the only relevance of the conversation about metformin.
Yeah, I take berberine, not metformin.
Is that another anti-diabetic?
It's a natural product. It's an herbal product that mimics metformin.
Could you hear that? It's a natural product that mimics metformin.
Okay. All right.
And so it is supposed to help regulate blood sugar and hopefully have some of the same effects as metformin.
Okay, good.
In relationship to that, I know a couple here in the Los Rios area who engaged in usually 48 hours of not eating every week. So they
Fasting.
they believe it will extend their lives. Has anyone read any research on that other than, you know, the stuff that pops up on YouTube as an ad when you're watching a video?
I've read a few things about intermittent fasting along those lines, but not too much, to tell you the truth. But I've heard some of the same thing.
Yes, intermittent fasting can be good for you. I think we have to go back to how we lived more than 10,000 years ago. And that was that we ate when we could eat. We didn't constantly snack, which is one of the reasons we have so much obesity. We don't have even the controls that we had as children, which is that we could not snack between meals. Our parents would prohibit it. We'd all sit down for breakfast at 7 a.m. We'd have lunch at 12 noon. We'd have dinner together at 6 p.m., which was a rule. It was you had to come home and you're playing whatever and sit down and have dinner. It was a social occasion. Today, people are eating all day long, and it's no wonder we have so much obesity. I doubt that it would do you great harm to go without food for even 24 hours. Certainly our forefathers did it 10,000 years ago.
Well, I have adopted a 2-meal-a-day plan of eating because I'm not nearly as physically active as I should be. And strangely enough, I find that the sort of 18, 19 hours of fasting from last night's dinner to brunch or lunch today doesn't bother me at all. I'm surprised.
I am very happy that I don't need Ozempic. I don't feel hungry, and usually I just eat 1 meal a day, dinner. So
That's quite extreme.
it works. My health is still with me, and as I say, I have dinner.
Not even a little
Okay.
snack.
What
Not even a
time do
little
you
snack
eat?
in the morning, Keaton.
No, although in the morning I might have half a papaya because I feel I need the fiber.
Mhm.
Not you know, for calories, just, you know, you need to have your GI system working.
Yeah.
But that's all.
Mm.
And I think half a papaya has very few calories.
Mhm.
For the future of medicine and the diagnostic process, are doctors necessary, or are we going to go to all AI with their very comprehensive algorithms?
Well, explain to me how AI is actually going to help, other than to chase what I see repetitive coincidences that point to some particular hormone or substance that produces a noticeable change in aging or the death rate of your cells.
Well, I was thinking more in the fact that they can analyze blood work, EKGs, X-rays, and so forth, and pinpoint.
So they're looking for markers.
They're looking for markers, and they're more subtle than maybe a doctor, physical doctor, can pick up.
Yes.
That's the question. I have a friend who is a doctor who says, no, the nonverbal cues or his experience is more important than what AI would pick up, and they would miss something. So we have a couple health professionals here. What are your comments on that?
You mean on the screen?
Yes,
Own up.
Catherine and Eric, do you have any comments on that at all?
The question was, the AI can evaluate lab tests and so forth and so on. Here.
You know, my reaction is that AI will do in terms of diagnosis is give you more things to think about that you would not come up just with your own amount of information. So instead of coming up with 2 or 3 ideas, they'll give you maybe 4 or 5. But it's still, I think it's still going to take someone looking at the whole picture and evaluating what AI is saying to decide what makes the most sense for that person. I don't, yeah, who knows for sure, but it seems to me that AI is going to be we're not using AI to the extent that we can use it today. And it's going to be a huge assist at coming up with the likely diagnosis. But the final one, I think, is still going to take sort of some synthesizing of all the information and seeing how it fits as the person presents to you, you know, with your exam and their complaints. That's my sense.
You know, there may be a time when AI will be, I don't know, through a camera or whatever, will be also sort of picking up those visual clues and, you know, putting them into whatever. I don't know how many ever used to watch that program House years ago. It was,
Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, and I was like that program. I thought I can't remember his name, the main actor. I thought he was a very, very good, but you know, in a nasty way, obviously. But you know, it was all about the mystery of these, you know, exotic illnesses that they couldn't figure out. Well, I suppose, you know, not now, but 10 years, maybe they could throw all these things that, you know, because they say, well, maybe it's this and maybe it's that. Maybe they could throw that into an AI, whatever, and maybe it would at least narrow some things down for them. I don't know.
Makes sense.
So yeah, this agrees with what I've seen. I think we're already here. If you think of AI as a machine, so I was a quality engineer and know that machines are better at performing repetitive tasks than humans are. We're good at specifying something the first way around, but I saw a very detailed study where they gave radiologists.
Whoops, we lost you there, Brad.
Thank you, President.
X-rays wasn't very good. We would not accept from
The audio has
patients.
hiccups.
I live near the Canadian-US border, and the border agents, when they ask you a question, they're told to ignore the answer and look at the body language, look at how somebody responded. So I think if we we can get to cameras performing these diagnostics, that'll help us. It was probably 5 years ago where the IBM computer Watson was fed a lot of cancer research papers, because unfortunately the profession's paid to publish information, not necessarily to share information. So there's a lot of new information coming out. And when they gave it to Watson and then gave it some of the difficult responding cases to look at, it came up with new and different courses of treatment that often turned to be helpful. So I think there's a real opportunity here.
I'm changing the subject a little bit. So last night when I was going through things, I came across this thing called CRISPR. Can someone give me a very short definition of what that is?
I've seen they do gene editing with that. And where they've been able to edit out diseases like, I think they took someone's blood and were able to take out a sickle cell anemia gene and put it back to this person that provided a means of treatment.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, precisely, it basically goes in and splices the gene open, so to speak, replaces the it replaces the defective can't find the word of the
Malevolent?
Pardon?
Malevolent?
Well, no, that's it's repairing the gene, and I just can't find the name of the pieces that it puts together. And that they have done that with sickle cell, and have cured people of it.
Thanks.
If I could change the subject altogether and ask the group a question, if it was possible through some science or miracle or whatever, that everybody on Earth, regardless of wealth, age, mental acuity, or lack thereof, could suddenly become immortal, healthy for all time, never more than 25 years old, but gaining in experience. Would that be a good thing or a bad thing?
You mean for society as a whole or for you personally?
No. It's an open-ended question. Would it be a good thing or a bad thing if what I was suggesting were to happen?
And would humans continue to reproduce?
That's one part of the scenario, or not? That's a good question.
Actually,
I'm talking about the general concept. Everybody woke up tomorrow knowing that they were going to live forever, never get sick again, never age another minute, never feel the pain of illness of any kind, no broken bones. Everything is hunky-dory for eternity. Would you like that? You going to go for that, guys?
Societally, it's been demonstrated that the aging populations are a real seriously bad issue.
Yes.
You look at China, Russia,
Okay.
Japan,
Yeah, but Norman, you're not addressing the issue. The issue question is, what if there were no more old people? No pain, no sickness, eternal youth. Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
I'm wondering if it's boring.
I've read some speculative fiction about that, which did show, bring out the boring, and also that people eventually would not reproduce because you already, so the society would not continually revive and come up with new ideas, because a lot of times the new ideas come from the youth. So I don't think it would be good for society as a whole. It would certainly be very different society.
Actually,
You're
what's
against
happening
eternal.
is that,
Joyce is against eternal youth.
Yeah.
I'm against eternal youth. What's the vote here?
James, we're jumping into what's going to be the topic for next month, which is a continuation of this longevity issue on antinatalism. And we'll be discussing that aspect of it next month.
I do think one of the things, if humans continue to reproduce, we eventually would have kind of tight elbow space. Because if you're 25 years old and you're continually 25 years old, you can continue to reproduce. And then with all the other people that get up there, they get that same age. I think I think the basketball court would get pretty tight after a while.
So you're against the idea.
I can't say for sure. I mean, that under that scenario, I guess we would have to figure out ways to increase land mass so that we can live, and kind of, okay, Kevin Costner, we need you now for Waterworld. Let's
There's
build
always Mars.
Or you go the other way with the matrix syndrome, and they all become electrical impulses living in your own reality jointly, or your joint reality, but it's all computer generated.
I don't know how many of you have heard, I had a line of reading several years ago that was talking about the concept of death and religion. I thought it was very interesting because in some respects, at least according to this line of thinking, religion, particularly the religions of eternal life, Christianity and Islam, for example, that what stood behind that was the problem of death. In other words, when you think about life, life is sort of this, for that which you go to college, for that which to get a degree, you get a degree to get a profession, so there's this chain of being that kind of just goes forward, and then all of a sudden death comes in and truncates it, so that it's sort of conceptualized the problem of death as an engineering problem. Okay, how do we engineer a solution to this terrible problem that our life goes only a certain distance and then it's cut off? And that's sort of where religion came in. Well, religion, let's invent some religions that can help us jump over the parapet of death and then, go on forever and ever. And what the it was, I mean, as silly as, I mean, I think it's an interesting thought, but what the point of the article, and I think they called, the word they used was called, freedom towards death. I think that was it, that, as opposed to taking this attitude of we're trying to run from the inevitable and we're trying to say, okay, let's invent Alice in Wonderland to get over this kind of stuff. Let's instead just face it that we're going to die, live in freedom towards death, and happiness and joy and all of those things. But let's not get into, this fairy tale thinking where, we're inventing eternities that simply aren't going to be there. And these inventions of eternity that aren't going to be here, I think have caused quite a bit of harm in this world as I think we see today. So anyway, I thought that was a very interesting way of approaching death. Not that death is good, but because it's inevitable and the attitude that we can take towards it, there are better and worse approaches to death, and we ought to try to take the better approaches to death.
I like that, Mike, and I also think that we also should look at the point of longevity kind of the other way around. Compared to, let's say, our grandparents' generation, we are all living much longer than people have before, every one of us. And every one of us is having, you know, I mean, much better, not just length of years, but much better involvement in life, not just because we're living longer, but, you know, there are medical procedures, there are even, you know, things like Zoom, which allow us to interact with other people where maybe somebody 100 years ago would be stuck in a room. I mean, so we actually are experiencing that longer life that people have talked about in the past.
Something I've not heard is that it's relationships, good relationships will extend your life. And loneliness has become an epidemic among older people. We really need to interact, and your mentioning of Zoom brings this topic up. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to make an observation that possibly the shift of medicine isn't necessarily extending life anymore because we all die. It is helping us have a quality of life. In other words, you know, this whole concept of, well, we'll keep you alive as long as possible versus we'll try and make your life as enjoyable as possible until it's your time. And I think that there's a mental shift going on in the medical profession towards that, towards a compassionate living, rather than just extending the body functions. Any comments on that?
Yeah, that's health span again, that you should have good health until you die.
Here, here.
I second that motion.
I have another question. When you die, assuming that the spiritual leaders are wrong, that you don't go off and have some conscious existence forever, presumably when you die, you have no sensations at all, and no memories, no anything. Before you're born, you are in that same condition. And think about it. When we on this Zoom were dead essentially for 13 billion years before we were born, right? And so what's the difference between 13 billion years of not being born and I guess what, another 13 billion years before the universe collapses? What's the distinction there?
Well, you're getting off into the realm of spirituality.
Well, no, I'm avoiding that. I'm saying, assuming that isn't the case, what's the difference between the condition of never having been born yet versus being dead? What is the distinction between those two conditions?
I've actually thought about that, James, and you know, like right now I'm reading a book on the 30 Years' War, and I'm really glad I wasn't alive in Europe during the 30 Years' War. It was a real mess, you know. And some of you probably, I was born in 1953, and probably I know some of you have me beat out a little bit on that. But I obviously have no memory of World War II. Maybe some of you do, and the anxieties that were there. And of course, my anxieties were about Vietnam and other things. So I guess this is maybe a terrible analogy, but and this is not a perfect one because you dream, but I've never minded going to sleep at night. You know, I kind of like to sleep. And I suppose, you know, eternity is a big, long sleep. Probably won't be that bad.
Mm-hmm.
To dream, perchance not to dream, right?
There you go. Quote Shakespeare among us.
Yeah, relationships, I think, are the key to this whole process. I mean, I've known Norman here for over 60 years. 60 years. And I think we've both become better human beings during those decades because we knew each other.
Mhm.
And it's the, I mean, I know for one thing, when I first met Norman, uh, I wouldn't say I was actually fit to be around. But he brought me around. He was very patiently brought me around to the affable guy I am today. And but you know, whenever I read about this first reading, the woman in the first part of the reading talked about relationships are what it's all about. That is just key, and that's one of the reasons I really enjoy these Zoom gatherings. And I've got a similar Zoom gathering with the college group that I was with, and that's productive because those folks also knew me back when I was less than perfect. Uh, so, yeah, encouraging relationships.
Well, and another thing, through life, we internalize others who have gone before us, which is very positive.
Absolutely, we're all of us. Uh, it's funny you think about multiple personalities. Every single person on this video is a combination of personalities of people we've known, people we've read about,
Mhm.
and that's what makes this so fun. We're each a very different pond in a very large forest.
Norman, congratulations. You did a good job.
Patience is its own reward.
Now, Norman, you weren't back there in the Davis days, were you? Was that after Davis?
Oh no,
No, it was, you
It
were
was after Davis,
after Davis.
basically, yeah.
Okay, all right. I
Because
read,
we developed a relationship in secondary.
I got you. Okay.
but you did visit the ranch.
Oh, yes.
See, that's the beauty of a 60-year-old relationship is it's impossible to bullshit the world because there's a witness to it. Your life, your whole damn life. Terrible.
Nope, that'd be good. It brings us around to reality.
That's right. That's right.
I do think, James, you're absolutely right. Relationships are so critical, which is obviously why I, participate in these forums. The downside of that is, as some of you know, my background is evangelicalism, and I've lost many of my friends, especially in the last few years in the Trump era. I lost a friend that I knew for since I was 10 years old. I just can't go there anymore. I have a friend whose son is a big Trumper. It's horrible for him. He just doesn't know what to do. So it works both ways, but that's why these good relationships are so important, because we do lose some relationships and it's a tragedy, but sometimes there's just nothing you can do about it.
Well,
Yeah.
but we're in an age where loss of friends due to death is much more common than they're going off the deep end.
And that's true. And I don't even know how to say this. This makes me weird to say, but I've dealt with death among friends a lot better than I've dealt with this other thing. It's almost a spiritual death, and he's still there. And we played football together. We did so many things together, and I can't talk to him anymore. It's really hard.
No, you're right. There's a finality in the death of our friends. And that's not true if there are great differences between us.
And I think that the rise of Trumpism has really done something to, when your friend dies, you have that memory, and we mostly tend to focus on the good things about the friend and the good times. But when somebody accepts this moral code that we find to be abhorrent and is still alive, you cannot, spend your time thinking of the good periods about that with that person. So I do agree with you, Mike. It's a more painful situation than someone that you care about is no longer physically with you.
Yeah, I only have wonderful memories of my mom and dad.
So I have a question for the group. And all the readings that you saw on the advancement of health and longevity and that, is there any trends in whether it be scientific, robotic, AI, or biological, that you saw that kind of perked your interest or gave you pause or had any real comments about where the direction it's going?
Surely AI is very encouraging to improve our quality of life. It's not as vague as humans.
I always thought vagary was one of the great advantages of human companionship.
But when you go to a medico, you'd prefer that the responses not be vague.
Okay, I misunderstood. Yes, I agree with you 100%. It's especially difficult for us folk these days because when we go see a doctor now, we think we've taken the wrong turn and arrived at a nursery school. It's amazing how young they
We
are.
do have that problem with practitioners. Yeah,
Whoa.
my nephrologist, I don't know that she's old enough to get a driver's license.
Yeah,
Everyone looks
it's
like
amazing.
days.
My primary care physician was a classmate of my son's in high school.
Oh, and Bob, to directly respond to your question, I think AI would be a wonderful idea if we could prevent humans from using it. If we would just if AI could just be allowed to do its own thing and do what it does best, rather than write novels and decide who stays in prison, if it were just allowed to sort of chug along on its own, doing medical research and stuff, it'd be great. But that's not going to happen. Humans are going to be constantly making AI better at helping to make our lives miserable. That's the problem with AI.
Yes, surely AI did not do terribly well in terms of paroling federal
Oh,
prisoners.
oh, awful.
Yeah.
And certainly I wouldn't want AI deciding whether anybody on this broadcast should go to prison or not. I mean, absolutely not. We're much too complicated a group for an AI algorithm to make that kind of decision.
Or how do you feel about making a diagnosis and a plan of treatment?
On a what?
I missed that.
Yes, I did too.
How
How do you
do
feel
we
about
feel about AI generating a plan of treatment?
I think that AI's got the same problem generating a plan of treatment as it does creating a novel. It will probably get all the parts and the adjectives and the adverbs correct, but it will have no understanding of what it's accomplishing. That's what's missing from AI. It does not have understanding. It has computational punch. That's all it's got. And AI is never going to be able to look at me and get to know me enough to know whether I even want that kind of a treatment. It will decide what is best for me based on what it thinks is right, not what I think is right.
Well, then how about this? I mean, do doctors actually use AI as a backup analytical tool for diagnosis?
Well, some of them do,
For,
Watson
and I
was
try
used
to avoid them.
second.
especially for imaging.
I didn't catch that.
All mammograms are read by AI today,
No, that's not true.
almost all.
And that's great because that's just a computational punch thing. It's not there's nothing subtle about reading a mammogram. It's pure dullness, but it takes computational punch. That's different from saying, okay, you've got mammary cancer. What's best for you? I don't want AI answering that question.
Why not?
You know,
Absolutely.
we had talked about sort of the dilemma of loneliness for, you know, particularly people in our age category. I'm sure we've all seen that AI is now working on sort of partners or pals or whatever you want to call it. And I actually had a very interesting encounter. I'm in Al-Anon. I'm not sure how many of you know about that. Is that, but my daughter has addiction problems, and I got involved in Al-Anon many years ago, and I find it to be very helpful. There's now an Al-Anon chat, you know, kind of AI chat, and the way they built this thing, and Mark Cuban apparently says if he was 20 years old and didn't want to go to college, he said he would become one of these people. You kind of go in and you coach the AI. I don't know exactly what that's about, but you take whatever expertise you have and you kind of, so they have some people that are doing that with AI, and they do that, you know, with all of the Al-Anon ideas and whatever. So I actually tried it the other day, you know, and you know, it was pretty good. I mean, I'm not saying, because they have what they call sponsors in Al-Anon, where I meet with my sponsor once a week, and you just kind of talk about stuff. And I tried it out because my sponsor said, give it a try. I was actually shocked how good a job it did. Now, it wasn't like talking to a person because it's obviously just text on the screen. But the things that it fed back to me as I asked the questions, I felt like, you know, it was the only thing I thought was it was a little too easy on me. I think it should have been a little bit more in my face. Maybe you can tell. I think you can even tell it that, say, be more in my face, and it'll do that. But
It will do that.
Yeah.
It will do that.
Yeah.
That's part of the problem.
So at any rate, I mean, like I said, it was just kind of a little experiment, but I actually, I did pretty well.
Is there such a thing as an AI doctor? In other words, a machine instead of a human being?
They're getting there.
We don't know. It depends on whether you're talking to them on the phone, because then sometimes they will sound like this, but they're really humans. Don't let them tell you otherwise.
That's great.
There is a clinic being developed, I think, in Japan that is strictly all AI, all robotic. No human contact at all.
This is one.
So,
What do you say there's a what in Japan?
so we're getting close to the end of the hour. Final comments? Mike?
As always, just enjoyed the discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Frank?
Well, I guess in my mind, using common sense and biological approaches to longevity makes more sense. And I see IA as an analytical tool. That's how I see the division between the two.
James?
Did you say James?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Great talking with you all. This reading is every month is really exciting, and I want to thank Bob for for keeping the brain cells going.
Brad?
I'm trying to go back and see where we started. Want to live longer. Interesting. I appreciate everyone's comments and also Bob. Yeah, your the work you do in putting the background together for the meeting. Thank you. And maybe a good suggestion, include the meeting number along with the invite, just in case anyone else has trouble like I did today.
Catherine and Eric?
I guess the main regret is I think most of us are about 10 years too old to take advantage of what's going to come in about the next 10 years. Things are escalating so fast. I thought it was interesting when on the Peter Attia interview. I don't know who the man he was interviewing with. They were having a discussion, but I don't know if people caught that we're not going to be able to necessarily speed up the rate at which new drugs will become available, but because of AI, the number of new drugs that will become available, for example, in about the next 10 years, will be exponentially greater. And so I think Peter brought up a good point about that. He talks about, can you for example, if you cook an egg and the white part becomes congealed, can you reverse it, or is that irreversible? So then the question becomes to us, the analogy to us is what is and will not be reversible in the aging process, and how it affects our body. So I mean, we're definitely doing some things. I mean, I'm just getting a series. Just got my third series of platelet-rich plasma injections into my shoulders for arthritis, and so that we can regenerate cartilage, and stem cells will even do more. But whether it can reverse some stuff, some of the damage and protein denaturing that happens, it's not clear. But it's an exciting time for people just a little bit younger than us. The key, I remember reading, I can't remember who said this, but the key is as long as they can keep extending life a little bit every year, and you can keep up with it, hopefully you'll reach the point that the technology will be available. So if we all can make it for the next 10 years, we may have to have a lot of technology that will be able to take advantage of. We'll see.
Joyce?
Oh, this has been great. You guys have given me a lot of things to think about, and I really appreciate that. It's interesting, but I particularly like what you said, James, about different, the time before we exist and the time after we exist. I have to think about that a lot, and I appreciate you giving me something to mull over in my mind. So thank you.
Keaton?
Yes, my focus is on healthspan. I'm interested in having the best quality of life, not extending life indefinitely. And I hope that these medications and AI, all these things contribute to a better quality of life, not necessarily to extend my life indefinitely. I'd like to also thank Bob for putting together that reading list and hosting. Yes, and thanks for everyone's input.
Norman?
I am very encouraged by the possibility of having a healthier lifespan, even though it's finite. But I think that even in our lifespan, that we will see improvements in our quality of life.
For myself, I'm more interested in, as we've been talking about, as in the stress towards compassionate medicine rather than longevity without compassion. So,
Yeah.
as far as next month, thanks to James for the topic, he brought up the term antinatalism. And so we're going to explore that concept and the philosophy behind it. And it's also because of that, and his question, he said, if we're all 25-year-olds, how it dovetails into longevity. So I thank you all for listening and coming into it. And I hope to see you all next month again.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh,
you.
You.
Yeah,
Bye, folks.
Bye.
take care.